Welcome back. Tonight we're covering chapter 14 of the book of Revelation. So in this chapter, we talk about the Lamb, the 144,000, the messages of the three angels, the reaping of the earth's harvest. So let's begin. Chapter 14, verse 1. Then I looked, and there was the Lamb standing on Mount Zion, and with him were 144,000 who had his name and his father's name written on their foreheads. And I heard a voice from heaven like the sound of many waters and like the sound of loud thunder. The voice I heard was like the sound of harpists playing on their harps. And they sing a new song before the throne and before the four living creatures and before the elders. No one could learn that song except the 144,000 who had been redeemed from the earth. It is these who have not defiled themselves with women, for they are virgins. These follow the Lamb wherever he goes. They have been redeemed from humankind as firstfruits for God and the Lamb. And in their mouth no lie was found. They are blameless. Then I saw another angel flying in mid-heaven with an eternal gospel to proclaim to those who live on the earth, to every nation and tribe and language and people. He said in a loud voice, "Fear God and give him glory, for the hour of his judgment has come, and worship him who made heaven and earth, the sea and the springs of water." Then another angel, a second, followed, saying, "Fallen, fallen is Babylon the Great. She has made all nations drunk of the wine of the wrath of her fornication." Then another angel, a third, followed them, crying with a loud voice, "Those who worship the beast and its image and receive a mark on their foreheads or on their hands, they will also drink the wine of God's wrath, poured unmixed into the cup of his anger. And they will be tormented with fire and sulfur in the presence of the holy angels and in the presence of the Lamb. And the smoke of their torment goes up forever and ever. There is no rest, day or night, for those who worship the beast and its image, and for anyone who receives the mark of its name. Here is the call for endurance of the saints, those who keep the commandments of God and hold fast to the faith of Jesus. And I heard a voice from heaven saying, "Write this: Blessed are the dead who from now on die in the Lord. Yes," says the Spirit, "they will rest from their labors, for their deeds follow them." Then I looked, and there was a white cloud, and seated on the cloud was one like the Son of Man, with a golden crown on his head and a sharp sickle in his hand. Another angel came out of the temple, calling with a loud voice to the one who sat on the throne, "Use your sickle and reap, for the hour to reap has come, because the harvest of the earth is fully ripe." So the one who sat on the cloud swung his sickle over the earth, and the earth was reaped. Then another angel came out of the temple in heaven, and he too had a sharp sickle. Then another angel came out from the altar, the angel who has authority over fire, and he called with a loud voice to him who had the sharp sickle, "Use your sickle and gather the clusters of the vine of the earth, for its grapes are ripe." So the angel swung his sickle over the earth and gathered the vintage of the earth, and he threw it into a great wine press of the wrath of God. And the wine press was trodden outside the city, and blood flowed from the wine press as high as a horse's bridle for a distance of about 200 miles. Wow. A lot of blood, a lot of angels and beasts, and 144,000 again. Remember, 144,000 is, we were talking last time about the number of the beast, 666 or 616, depending on which language. And in Hebrew, the 144 is the number of the Garden of Eden. Multiply that by myriads or thousands, and it is talking about the return to Eden, the return to paradise from all those who had been gathered, who had the name of the Lord on their forehead, much like, remember, the mark of the beast is on the forehead or in the hand. John is telling us that all of that is a parody of those saints who have the number of the Lord, the name of the Lord written on their heads. So here in chapter 14, we have after John has given us the account of that unholy trinity of the dragon, the first beast, and the second beast or false prophet, John now turns his attention away from the followers of the beast and returns to the followers of Christ, who have been sealed with the name of God and his Messiah. What we have is an interlude that is marked by reassurance for the church during their trials and their great tribulation. John 14 opens with a scene of peace and calm and rejoicing. He sees the Lamb of God standing on Mount Zion. With the Lamb are the 144,000 of the redeemed. John speaks of a new song that they sing before the throne and before the 4 living beasts and before the 24 elders. It is the song of the redeemed, and no one in heaven could sing that song except for those who had been redeemed from the earth, the 144,000. It talks about the victorious army as those who have not been defiled, those who have not defiled themselves with women. On the surface, it sounds very much like it's only men who have never slept with women who can follow the Lamb wherever he goes. But that is simple Hebrew Bible or Old Testament imagery, to be sure. That image, found so often in the Hebrew Bible, isn't referencing sexual immorality, but rather it's talking about contact with pagan imperial cultic worship. That is what is being referred to as fornication or adultery. Therefore, the 144,000 are those who have not committed the adultery of joining the imperial pagan cult, joining them in worship. The imagery of the community as being chaste virgins is also in keeping with John's understanding of the church as the pure bride of Christ. This is, of course, in contrast to the harlotry of idolatry that we find in John, as well as in books like Hosea in the Hebrew Bible. So, beginning in verse 6 now, we see the appearance of the 3 angels. John sees an angel flying in mid-heaven with an eternal gospel and eternal good news to proclaim to the inhabitants of the earth. The angel warns that the hour of judgment is coming, and he calls for the inhabitants of the earth to give God glory and honor and worship. Then a second angel appears. The second angel announces fallen. Fallen is Babylon the Great. John will return to that theme in chapter 19, and we'll talk about Babylon later. But let me just say in advance that Babylon is not the Catholic Church. It is not an apostate church. It's the same old suspect. It's Rome. The third, pause. So you might be saying to yourself, Travis, it seems like you're making Rome the great villain on the earth, that Satan has motivated the first beast, the Roman Empire, that you're blaming them for everything. Yeah, exactly. That's exactly what John was doing. John was saying all the bad things that have happened to us have come from the Roman Empire and the agencies of the Roman Empire. So, I mean, think about it. Imagine, as Dietrich Bonhoeffer did, living in Nazi Germany. Every bad thing that was happening seemed to come from them. And he was right. Or think about Solzhenitsyn living in the Soviet Union, it would seem to him that every bad thing had its cause in them. And he was right. The ultimate villain, John would tell us, or Bonhoeffer or Solzhenitsyn, would be the unholy spirit, the Satan that motivated these evil empires to do such things. Okay, back to the third angel. The third angel predicts the condemnation of those who continue their worship of the beast and its image. John says that these people will drink the wine of God's wrath, and they will be tormented with fire and sulfur in the presence of the holy angels and in the presence of the Lamb, he says. Since John is calling the message of that angel, the previous angel, an eternal gospel, he doesn't separate the announcement of the gospel, the good news, and the salvation of God in Christ from the eternal judgment announcement. Both of them are everlasting, he says. He's saying, obviously, that, look, there's this unending good news, but there is also unending bad news. When we look at the appalling picture of divine violence, we have to always keep in mind that this does not represent literal events that are going to happen sometime in John's future, and certainly not in our future. No, the point is to reveal how horrible it is to worship anything or anyone less than the one true God. As always, the first thing to do in interpreting apocalyptic literature is to consider the symbolic language. Fire and brimstone are, of course, traditional symbols for the fate of those who persistently reject God. And remember that brimstone is simply the Old English term for sulfur. Sulfur is not only hard to extinguish, but it also burns with the particularly noxious fumes. Since John uses metaphors and symbols throughout the rest of the book of Revelation, it would be unjust of us to force a literal translation here. John is simply saying here that those who continue to live in opposition to the structure of God's universe must suffer. So, the most terrible thing that a person can do, according to John, is to deliberately turn away from the living God. For such people, according to John, the torment seems forever and ever. The inevitable consequence of those that eternally persist in such rejection of God is that they will continue to suffer. The question, of course, is whether any soul could, in fact, eternally resist God. We doubt it. Three final angels make their appearance in chapter 14. Here comes finally the words of comfort, which actually comprise the second beatitudes found in the book of Revelation. John hears a voice from heaven declaring, "Blessed are the dead who from now on die in the Lord. They will rest from their labors," John says. "Their deeds will follow them, their good deeds and their sufferings will follow them as witnesses before the judge of the living and the dead." Then we see a white cloud. And seated on that white cloud is one, he says, like the Son of Man. That's kind of imagery also drawing from the book of Daniel. Remember, as the three Hebrews were in the fiery furnace, and yet there was a fourth one who looked like the Son of Man. Once again, John returns to Daniel for some of his imagery. But this Son of Man has a golden crown on his head and a sharp sickle in his hand. The first of these three angels calls for the Son of Man to use his sickle and reap the harvest, because the harvest of the earth is fully ripe. The one seated on the cloud then swings his sickle and reaps the earth. The believers, those who have the mark of the Lord and his Messiah on their heads. The believers, these are the ones, the saints, are now gathered there from the four corners of the earth. Then the second angel comes out, and he comes out of the temple, and he also has a sharp sickle. But a third angel shows up. The third angel comes out from the altar, and it says that he had authority over the fire. And he said to the second angel, use your sickle now and gather the clusters of the vines of the earth. Those who do not have the mark of the Messiah on their head. Those who are not numbered among the 144,000, or who are not numbered among the saints. The second angel swings his sickle, sure enough, harvests the clusters of the vines of the earth, and the second angel then gathers up the grapes of the earth, and it says throws them into the great winepress of the wrath of God. But once again, we should stop being afraid of the word wrath. It doesn't mean vengeance. It doesn't mean rage. A better word in Greek is the English word, passion. The passion that God has for all creatures, all people on the earth. And in using what is now conventional apocalyptic imagery, John is showing that everyone on earth will be beneficiaries of the passion of Christ. Even the adversaries of Christ will become part of the divine vintage. Nice. Next time, chapters 15 and 16. Have a good night.